Hello, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Just last week, just before a training session around stress and energy management, head of HR called me and said, Monica, would you mind not mentioning the words mental health, wellness Wednesdays, and mindfulness? And I said, well, that's a bit tricky. Why? And she said to me, because we're so done with all that stuff. And so it was quite interesting exploring all of that in the session. And the reality was that people were fed up of the words, but they were more aware than ever how important it is to push all of those things onto the agenda. So I make no apologies. I will be mentioning all of those words in this talk. And the other word that I get asked not to mention in some of the sessions that I run is the C word, the COVID word. But I'm afraid talking about mental health without referring to COVID is really tricky. So without further ado, let's dive in. I've called it Doctor, Doctor, You're Human Just Like Me, and it's actually a very daring subject. I, mere mortal, patient world, telling doctors to stop just for one moment and reflect on the fact that they are human, just like me, just like everyone. But I put myself out there to try to raise awareness of doctors and the stress levels because I'm witnessing it on a daily basis over here in Spain. And I have to be honest, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to see people losing their motivation, sense of morale, sense of camaraderie, and the why of why they became doctors in the first place because of people's neglect of following the rules that have been put out there to try to protect our hospitals here. So this is really an honour of all doctors, but I would also say to all medical professionals, we value, we appreciate, and we recognise all the hard work that you do, but you're human. And it is normal to fall apart, and it is normal now and again to say, why are we doing this? So just for the next few minutes, please bear with me, hear me out. Maybe something that I say in the next few moments might resonate, make you think about things a little bit differently, maybe even introduce a new daily habit that might make life a little bit more bearable at the moment. I open with this photo that I absolutely love from a doctor that I speak to almost on a daily basis since lockdown began. She's called Doctora Carmen Alegría, and she unfortunately caught COVID early on in the crisis. And she was housebound for about 8 to 9 weeks, where she had to live completely on her own and only connect with the outside world through social media. And she knew nothing about social media, so her learning curve was pretty steep. And she learned about Twitter, she learned about YouTube, and I have to tell you, she now has so many followers, she has actually become an influencer in the medical world, giving out lots of helpful, practical tips and tricks to doctors in the Spanish-speaking world. I would love to run a session with her one day. More on her later. So in this session, we're going to be looking at the impact of stress, what that actually means on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to share with you some stories, some real stories about doctors and their coping strategies. And then I'm going to invite everyone to perhaps reflect on what is it they're doing, what is it they're not doing, and what is it they could introduce into their day-to-day life to try to manage better their stress levels. Let me begin with a story about my cousin. My cousin, Dr. Stefano Cantafio, is a surgeon in a hospital in Florence. And his stress-busting technique is going out and taking photographs. But he hadn't until recently taken any photos inside the hospital. And he has created the most phenomenal selection of photographs, which I hope one day will be exhibited because they are simply stunning. Just last week, in his hospital, not on his watch, but on a colleague's watch, our gorgeous uncle, Giancarlo, sadly passed away. It was a very sad moment for all the family. And because from Spain we're not allowed to go over to Italy for funerals or for any other purpose at the moment, we had to watch the funeral online via WhatsApp on the phone. And the entire service was really moving. But the most moving part of all was watching my normally strong, stoic surgeon cousin fall apart and just cry so openly about the passing of our uncle. It was a reminder that doctors are humans, and it really inspired my talk today. Don't worry, this isn't all going to be doomy, gloomy stuff. Humour does come in along the way because we mustn't lose our sense of humour, but I did want to share that story with you. One of the ways that I've heard the whole COVID journey explained in the best possible way is by the CEO of Mind Gym, one of the organisations that I work with. And there is a link at the end of this talk if you want to watch his entire presentation. But basically, in a nutshell, what happened when the crisis kicked off, certainly over here, was people went into Florence Nightingale mode, heroism. We saw people left, right and centre offering themselves, helping in all professions, not just in the medical profession. Energy was high and people were all for helping out. And then it was plateauing a little bit as people thought, this isn't going to be over anytime soon. Then there was a dip. And when the dip happened, people were experiencing fatigue, frustration, a little bit of irritation, apathy. There was even anxiety. And some people said it was a feeling of grief. It was an all over body experience. And then as we came out of that, people were going into recovery mode. We're seeing a little bit of what we call survivor syndrome. But here in Spain, there is a risk that we're going into now a second wave, and people are going through yet another incredible up and down. So my first invitation to everybody is to grab a pen and grab a piece of paper. This model, for those of you who recognize it, is based on the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross change curve model from the 1960s, which was originally designed around managing the feelings and emotions we get after someone passes away. I found it hugely important, hugely helpful when working with people who've lost a loved one to kind of understand the dips and troughs and the ups and downs after someone passes away. But I would invite you to draw your own COVID journey, because of course it's not the same for everybody. Was it lots of ups and downs, or was it up for a lot longer and then a massive dip? Where did it go? It's a really helpful exercise by somehow writing it down and drawing it. People have expressed how it can sometimes make people feel some feeling of control. So it's a really good exercise. So I would invite you to have a go at that. What does all of this mean? What it means is that because this has gone on for so many months, we are experiencing not acute stress, but chronic stress. And this is over the long term, and this is why this is such a crisis right now. People are starting to not be so helpful to others, but more about head down and what does this mean for me and my immediate family. And we've lost that spirit of collaboration, which we had at the beginning. I'm certainly seeing that a lot, and some of it is coming back again, and I'd like to hope that it will. I've also heard some medical professionals admit that they have got potential to get stomach ulcers, and certainly a nurse that lives in the flats just behind our house, I met him on a walk just the other day, and he has been given 2 weeks off for high blood pressure. And he said that this is a problem. He said he feels so guilty being off, he's letting down his colleagues, and he has been fighting to reduce the 2 weeks. But he didn't look well. He really, really didn't look well. And I think this is the problem, is that we have these knock-on effects of chronic stress. And it's very difficult to stop and admit when things aren't going well. So that would be my first call out. Please, please, please. Your health is so important. You can't look after us patients if you don't look after yourselves first. And then the last impact of chronic stress is obviously on decision making, on response times. And this is where we enter into the whole mental health risk. And some medical professionals have admitted to me that it's impacting on their relationships at home, on their friends, because they have not got the physical time or energy. And of course, we need our connections to keep us strong. So that's a little bit about the background of the impact of stress. And now we're going to move into, well, okay, so what are our coping strategies? Obviously, with such a frantic pace of work in the hospital environment, particularly now, but even when COVID passes, because it will pass, it's about how do we manage that day-to-day stress. Calming the mind is something we've all heard about. I was a meditation resistor, I have to confess, and I have now done a lot of explorations, especially since my husband and then my son suffered brain related injuries. I have explored the mind, and I have explored what happens when we're able during the day to calm our mind. So that's the first area to focus in on. The second part is to get some perspective. Sometimes when we're so stressed, we find it hard to see another person's point of view. And that's hugely important. It's about understanding that it's about what Martin Seligman, the godfather of positive psychology, says is about learnt optimism. So not I'm going to die of COVID, but I might get COVID and it could be bad, but I'm going to do everything I can to get better. It's about how the narrative and how we talk about what's happening. And then the third one is about our response time. So from when there's a trigger, when there is an event that happens that we need to respond to, how quickly are we responding and how in control of that response are we? And I've certainly experienced that people are a little bit more hot-headed, a little bit more short-fused at the moment. And my own daughter told me a few months ago, Mum, you've really got to calm it down. And as the wonderful Brené Brown once said, we can be scared, not scary. And I have to confess, I went through a period of time myself of being a little bit scary when things just felt out of control. Perfectly normal. So over the beginning of COVID, I attended loads of webinars. And on one of those webinars, I met the wonderful Heidi Connell and Kathy Marshall. And over the next few weeks and months, we pulled our resources and pulled together our expertise and recognized that all three of us were dealing with grief and loss with our respective clients and our respective worlds. And we were looking at stress and its impact. But we decided to shift the focus and try to really explore what was it that people who had traumas did, or what was their behavior or their attitude? Why was it that some people after a trauma were better able to recover and come out of their curve? What were those characteristics? And we pulled those all together in a model, which I'm going to share with you. And it's part of a program that we've designed and developed and delivered. And I wanted to share some of those findings with you today. So in order to make the transition from stress and negativity, we have got to make a mental mind shift. So the way we're going to do that is with a very powerful question. I loved it when Heidi first shared this with us, and it's so powerful that I'd like to share it with you. So just if you get yourself comfortable, and I know this will be weird for some people, but if you can, just close your eyes just for a moment. Take a really big, deep breath in. Leave your eyes open if that feels uncomfortable, by all means. And just think for a moment. Imagine you're a year, 5 years, maybe even 10 years from now, looking back on 2020, looking back on the COVID year. And what is it that you felt particularly proud about? So finish the sentence. I am proud of myself for. Give that some thought. I am proud of myself for blank. So when I've done this exercise with other people, I've had things like I'm proud of myself for being patient. That would certainly be on my list. I'm proud of myself for being flexible. I'm proud of myself for being brave. And the one that touches me the most is when people say, I am proud of myself for being kind to me. And that's really where what mental health is all about. It's recognizing that we've got to be kind to ourselves. So whatever word that you've put in there, if you just write it down, Some people have reported back that they've put that on a post-it note and they've put it above their desk, and it's like a daily reminder of what is it you most want to focus on, what characteristic. And this is the model. This is our post-traumatic growth model, and very grateful to the wonderful Heidi Connell for bringing this to life after so many weeks and months of debating and discussing what the qualities were of someone who seemed to be able to have greater resilience post-trauma. These were the 5 qualities. We're going to look at these and bring this theory, this model to life through 5 personal stories about 5 medical professionals. We have personal agility, the ability to make a mental mind shift and go from I can't to I can. It's about relationships. It's about not being alone. Loneliness is a terrible, terrible problem in a crisis, and it's about connecting. Vitality, we don't just mean stopping and breathing. That's not comfortable for everybody, but it's about how we connect with body and mind. What exercise do we do? How do we de-stress? Then there's meaning. There's the I see. There is about what is the purpose of the work that we do. And I know that for many medical professionals, that has been a challenge, remembering what it's all about when people are breaking the rules and you're busting a gut in the hospital. And then last but not least, it's about possibilities. It's the I will phrase. What is it that I will do in the future? Because if we only deal with the day-to-day and we have nothing to look forward to, that can also be incredibly problematic. So there we have it, the post-traumatic model that we're going to look at now, reflecting on the 5 parts of the wheel. So first of all, I can. And this is the wonderful Doctora Ilana Forada. I just love this photograph. You can see her happiness in her eyes. And this was taken just 3 days ago, and I asked her if I could include this in this presentation. It wasn't the story some months ago. When I first met her back in November last year, she was in a workshop around communication skills. And she admitted in front of her colleagues, who were also junior doctors, that having only just started in the hospital, she was struggling with what she could only describe as imposter syndrome. She admitted that she felt that she didn't deserve to be there. This was a shock to me as a patient, as somebody who always has doctors high up on a pedestal. And she said, that is exactly the problem, Monica. We are up high on a pedestal, and that's a really, really difficult place to be. And I struggle with it. Then COVID hit. And just a few weeks in, we had a really wonderful conversation where she was finding it an incredible pace. But she said suddenly overnight, she went from, I don't deserve to be here. I can't do this. I can't live up to the expectations of everybody, to I do deserve to be here. And she said, the real turning point for her was one day she went out onto the balcony. I should explain that here in Spain, every evening at 8 o'clock, there was an applause for the medical professionals. We did it every single night from the 14th of March for weeks. Not everybody, but I would say a lot of people, certainly in our community, they would all come out. And in the hospitals, it was an opportunity for doctors and medical professionals to go out onto the balcony and take in that adulation and that thanks and that gratitude. And she told me the story of how she remembers distinctly this one moment stepping out onto that balcony and having had quite a few weeks of finding it really uncomfortable, kind of putting her hand on her heart and looking at those people around her in the flats and saying, I do deserve to be here, and I can do this, and I will do this. And that was her turning point. And she's come on leaps and bounds. So I can. It's about having a perspective shift. The second part is I connect. And I'm going to illustrate this part of the wheel with Emilio Casanovas, who is a nurse from the Hospital del Mar, another hospital here in Barcelona. And for him, he said his role, not just as being a nurse, but also being in charge of the rosters, in charge of everybody's shifts, was a hugely difficult job, especially as people's fatigue kicked in, as people were starting to become a bit ill, anxiety levels were rising. He said The connection between the team was hugely important. It's what kept his morale up. But remember, I mentioned in the beginning that I bumped into a nurse on the front the other day who had high blood pressure. This was him. This was Emilio, who did get high blood pressure from constantly making sure everybody was connecting, him himself included. But he recognizes he didn't take the time out to just be still as well. So connecting is important, but as he admits, not at our own expense of our own health. And he said, it's connecting between our peers, but he said how important it was to come home every night for his wife and his children, to be able to share some of the challenges and frustrations, and most of all, to not be ashamed to ask for help. Hugely, hugely important. His hospital had many initiatives which focus very much around the connectivity between patients and hospital staff, and a couple of them that I wanted to share with you. One was they did a call out for all iPads. They wanted families to donate iPads because when we were in severe lockdown here, patients were literally dying alone, and the iPads allowed connectivity back home. Another initiative they had was wheeling out patients down through the lift and onto the beach just in front of the hospital. It's such a phenomenal initiative that they've actually, I've just found out, they've been put forward for a national prize. Connectivity, that's always been their focus. It's also a hospital that's part of an incredible research program. I know there are many around the world, and Silvia, the nurse in charge of this program here, said it would be wonderful to have a platform somewhere where all of these stress research programs could be brought together so we could have shared information. They are involved in a research program run by a research university called Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona. It's funded by Banco Santander, and it involves 3 hospitals. And they started exploring stress levels in hospital professionals before COVID, where they had wearables, they had a questionnaire, and then they had cognitive interactive games to be able to judge the baseline. When COVID kicked in, they decided this was even more of an important study to do. And they're very keen to connect with other hospitals. Again, I will leave that link at the end of the talk for those of you who are also in this field, because as she said, we are looking at biofeedback. We are looking at all of this latest developments in how we manage stress levels, and hospitals need to be sharing best practice. That is connectivity. Emilio also wanted me to share with you one of his go-to strategies for managing his mental health. He said sometimes he's so left brain, he's so about his Excel spreadsheet and his shifts, that sometimes he recognizes he doesn't make the best decisions. So in his drawer under his desk, he has a little box of oblique strategy cards. They're just random sentences. He pulls them out, he looks at them, reads them, and that one sentence, he just sits and reflects and just lets his mind wander and have a bit of imagination. He said, it's a weird thing. I can't do breathing exercises, but when I do this, I can feel my right brain and my creativity come alive. And that is how I make better decisions. You can look it up. It's another 1970s psychologist. Next up is I Breathe. This is about people recognizing the importance of stopping and exercising, doing jumping jacks, or playing a musical instrument, or simply breathing. And this is our Doctora Carmen Alegría. This was an interview I did with her just when she was at home with COVID. And she put on her doctor's coat and stethoscope because she said, I feel like a doctor again when I've got my cape on. She has what she calls a micro reset technique, which she said she knows a lot of doctors who already have this technique, but she said she does not stop wanting to spread this message. So I'm spreading this on her behalf to the English speaking community, where she said, getting enough sleep is important, but actually a day is a long time in the hospital world. And what she said is hugely important is that ability to stop, take a deep breath, find our little go-to that just stops us and grounds us. And for example, one technique is just rubbing 2 fingers together feeling the ridges of the fingers, gets us out of our head and just into our fingers. And that was from Shirzad Chamine, who is a Stanford professor who's running an amazing program called the Positive Intelligence Program for coaches around the world to try and promote this concept of short mini micro breaks throughout the day can calm the mind and have a hugely beneficial impact on our stress levels. She shared a story to bring this to life. She shared a story about how on Sunday night she was called out with the ambulance to go and tend to a patient. When they got there, it turned out it was a very minor incident. It was some guy who had a slightly inflamed left toe on his left foot. When they got into the ambulance, her and the ambulance driver, they were fuming. They were absolutely furious that this guy had wasted their time, and they were ranting for a full 10 minutes until she said, "Whoa, stop. Good to get angry. We've got to get out of this angry rut. This is not doing us any good." And she got the ambulance driver to turn off the engine, to get out of the ambulance and to stand with her, close their eyes, just feel their feet on the ground, the hand on the heart. And she said, "Let's remind ourselves why we do what we do." And they breathed together for a couple of breaths. And then she said, when they opened their eyes, this is what they saw. This was taken with the ambulance driver's camera. He could not believe they'd driven for a full 10 minutes with a beautiful balmy evening and an incredible full moon. Neither of them had seen it because they'd got stuck in anger. But the thing was that they stopped. And she said, that is a fantastic go-to. It's normal to get angry and frustrated, but it's just not staying in angry for too long. Next is Dr. Stanley Rom from a hospital in the UK. He's been retired now for over 15 years. I met him many, many years ago, and another doctor that I have a very strong relationship with. Really, we discussed many, many times how important it was to see things from another point of view. This goes back to the perspective taking idea and being able to really think carefully about a response before just giving an automatic response. He's got a wonderful, calm South African accent. And the first time I met him 24 years ago was when I had a little baby in my arms who did not stop screaming for 6 months. As I walked in, he looked at me, took his glasses off and said, "Mrs. Evason, he's your baby. What do you think's the matter with him?" My instant reaction was, "But you're the doctor. You need to tell me what's the matter." But I looked at him and I smiled and I said, "Wow, that is quite an incredible perspective." And long story short, together we discussed the baby's cry and why it was happening. And he explained that sometimes as a doctor, we can jump in with an answer. And over the years, he developed this technique where he developed the skill of listening. And he said, and he would couple that with what his gut feel was saying and obviously his medical experience. But he said how important it is to always try to see the perspective of other people. He also firmly believes that as medical professionals, it's very important to ask for feedback. And as he always used to say to me, it's very important to understand that when we ask for feedback, we may not always get what we want to hear. We hear what we need to hear. That's the important difference. But whatever feedback we get, it's then up to us what we do with it. But that's the way that we get perspective. So that ability to see, that's another huge quality of people who are able to manage adversity. The other characteristic we found a lot in people who were resilient and able to manage the crisis is people with an I will, ability to be able to think about future plans. So Viktor Frankl, who I mentioned in a slide earlier, was a Holocaust survivor who recognized that there were some people stuck in the concentration camps who could only think about the misery they were in. And yet there were others that, despite everything, a bit like Nelson Mandela, were able to really think about what life was going to be like when they left their current situation. And this is Dr. Toby Koller, originally German, but in a hospital here in Spain, who said, What always kept him going when he had to spend weeks in a local Airbnb because he couldn't go home to his young wife and children over the lockdown to protect them, was always imagining what plans they would have, what it would feel like to watch a film under a duvet with his kids and his wife with a homemade pizza, what it would be like the first time he'd be allowed out on his mountain bike. Those are the kind of things that really kept him going when the chips were down. Again, none of this is rocket science. We all know all of this stuff, but sometimes it's a really good exercise to stop and reflect. Are we spending enough time in thinking about what could come next, the good stuff? I did ask him for this presentation to send me a picture of him with his mountain bike, because I know that's his go-to, but instead he sent me this. I did have to chuckle when I got it. And I said, but Dr. Collar, I thought you were going to send me a picture of the bike. And I said, was this your wife? Did she put you up to it? And he said, well, yes. He said, I am a very stiff. I am a man. I haven't been very flexible. But I have to say that if it wasn't for my wife, I would not have known about yoga. But it is a fantastic way to detach. I can't do it every day, but on the days when I do it, I do feel how my mind calms down. I do feel how my response time isn't quite so quick and how I can get a different perspective. So that's the wonderful Dr. Toby Collar on his yoga mat. So there you have it in a nutshell. This is 3 modules that I've condensed down just into a few minutes, but I hope you can see that here are some concrete strategies, if you like, for managing our stress. The qualities of people who had managed to work with their resilience and really try to transform this bad situation into more pleasant moments. So this is the model that I would really like to leave you with and invite you on your piece of paper to perhaps continue putting on a little ... after each one. I can. What is it that you can do? What is it that you are struggling with, but you know that you can't do it yet? What is perhaps a relationship that you haven't invested enough time in recently? It could be a peer, but it could be someone in your family or a friend who makes you feel good, who energizes you, and you've maybe not reached out to them. What about vitality? Are you work and sleep, or are you managing to make a little bit of time for the important things in life? Meaning, how often do you stop and feel that sense of purpose, to remind yourself about the work that you do, to have a think about what it means to be doing what you do? And last but not least, I will. What is it that you're really looking forward to doing? Perhaps writing it down and saying, when this is over, I will. Or not even when this is over. This weekend or tonight, I will open that beautiful bottle of wine and drink it with my partner. Whatever that I will is, it does make a difference if you write it down. Here are some references that I've mentioned in the talk. So I very much recommend the work of Robert Sapolsky on why zebras don't get ulcers. It's a fantastic book. And there's the link on the wellness precipice. So to conclude, doctors, nurses, medical professionals, you're all human, just like me, just like us. Please remember, one size fits no one. We all have to find what works for us. It's about having an open mind. And if you've managed to listen this far, then that's a great starting point. It's about listening to different people and what works for them, and then trying to decide what you could use as a technique. And last but not least, always remember to keep your sense of humor, because we have lost our sense of humor over COVID. But laughing and being able to see the funny side of life is probably the greatest gift of all. And so that is my parting message. Let's try to remember that there are fun parts to this difficult life. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, and I look forward now to some questions.